potentially a big hidden cause is glue ear. According to the NHS, 8 out of every 10 children are likely to have undiagnosed glue ear before they're 10. And that's a huge number. So if you're unlucky enough to have glue ear in key stage, early years, key stage 1, it's a bit like having your fingers over your ears when trying to listen to someone, and everything's a bit muffled, and you're just going to struggle to hear what everyone else can hear clearly. And that might well be a contributing cause to some children struggling to learn to read, because the glue ear goes away, it sorts itself out, but the legacy of that problem remains. If you inconveniently don't learn to read during early years key stage 1, then it becomes increasingly unlikely that you're going to get the experience later on. Also, visual problems might contribute. According to optometrists, 1 in 5 children in key stage 1 have undiagnosed visual issues, which again are likely to be diagnosed or to have resolved later. But in that crucial period, that might prevent them from seeing the letters that they're trying to associate sounds with, which could be a real problem as well. And there are also neurological issues, which you're aware of, I'm sure, as well as orthographical issues which are basically caused by English itself. This map here, I think, is really quite stark. Look at the figures for Britain as compared to the rest of Europe. This is it's corrected for age, I should say. So obviously in different European territories, children start learning to read at different ages. So it's had that corrected on here, taken out and factored out. But even so, you can see that we seem to be doing an appalling job in the UK. What's going wrong? But if you look at some other countries, you see some interesting patterns. So look at Portugal and France and Denmark. They seem to have quite high percentages compared to the single digits in most of the other places on there. And the problem here is not necessarily the way English is being taught. That might contribute, but it's much more about our orthography, our writing system. English is what's called an opaque orthography, and that means the correspondence between letters and sounds is far less predictable than it is in other languages. And that's true, but to a lesser extent in French and Portuguese and Danish, and not true in those other European languages, which are very transparent orthographies. And that here, if we compare English and Spanish, for instance, you've got the alphabetic codes of both languages there. So in English, we've got 44 sounds we can make, only 24 sounds in Spanish. So almost double the number of sounds. But even worse than that, in English, we have over 170 different spelling combinations, whereas in Spanish, there are only 40 ways to spell those 24 sounds. So you can learn Spanish orthography, you can learn to decode Spanish much more quickly, much more accurately than anybody can learn to decode English. And so this graph here sort of shows the problem that in Spanish, between the ages of 7 and 9, a Spanish 7-year-old really isn't that far behind a Spanish 9-year-old, because they've pretty much cracked it by 7. A French 7-year-old is way behind. By the time they're 9, they haven't really caught up with a Spanish 7-year-old. But look at the English child at 7; they're miles behind. By the age of 9, an English 9-year-old is about at the same level as a French 7-year-old. And that's because of the orthography of English. It's a more difficult language to learn to decode. So there we are.